the easiest part of my journey, I'd say, has been the climb, in the fact that there's always been somebody there to maybe gain inspiration from, or gain whatever it might be. Like, there's the path, it's already been trailed, like you've got it, it's all good. I think it's become more challenging when you kind of get to the sharper end of that spike, and there's no longer that. I know for sure, if I got to the top of the spike, and it's a pretty lonely place, and it's almost like you're running, and then you run off the edge of a cliff and you're just free falling, or you got nothing to hang on to, and you're just kind of left to your own devices. And I think some people, they can manage that quite well, and maybe stay still and just be good with it. But for me, it kind of sent me into a bit of a spiral, and it almost had an uneasy feeling to it. And it maybe took me a few, I'd say even years, to get back to ground, to be able to build a different foundation of an individual foundation to support from, and then kick back off with that.
Welcome back, everyone, to episode 35 of the Waterski podcast with none other than the man himself, Will Asher. Finally get to publish this. We tried twice, meaning that the first time we recorded, this was over Skype whilst I was in self-isolation, and he was in Claremont. 4 hours in, my computer basically crashed. So I lost my part of the audio, making the interview really not publishable. So I just drove down to Claremont whenever I had a chance, and we recorded again. So we'll refer to this episode as 2.0, and the first recording, which didn't get published, as 1.0. So just to give you a sense of, while you hear a lot of 1.0s and 2.0s in this episode that is brought to you by the FlowPoint Method. FlowPoint Method is a brand new online waterski training program developed by Jenny LaBaw and Marcus Brown, who is one of the guests of this show, episode 10. If you haven't heard it, listen to that one, go and check it out. So really, the reason why this program started is that performance in any sport, including water skiing, depends on a lot of factors, right? And Marcus and Jenny really took a holistic approach in creating the FlowPoint Method. And really, the FlowPoint Method is for people who are truly committed to take their skiing to the next level, no matter what level they're at, right? This program covers technique, fitness, nutrition, and mindset. Really a first when it comes to a holistic approach to life on the water. I've been in the program. I love it. This is week 3 for me. They have the right approach, and this is also why I'll be collaborating with them on the mindset section of the FlowPoint Method, which will be coming up in the ensuing weeks. With daily and weekly updates and an extremely extensive library of videos, instructionals, and writings, you can finally remove all the guesswork and get the most out of your time on the water. And you can become a member of the FlowPoint Method by going to thewaterskipodcast.com/FlowPoint Method, one word. Or you can click in the link in the show notes. If you are considering the program and you want to support the podcast, please use the link on the show notes or go to thewaterskipodcast.com/FlowPoint Method. Well, without further ado, let's jump into part 1 of 3 of my interview with Will. Enjoy. Well, should we start? Will, take 2, man.
Take 2.
Let's try this again.
Well, first time I think we got close to cracking 4 hours. So
Yeah, we'll see where this one goes, right?
yes, I'm looking forward to it.
Welcome back to the Waterski Podcast.
Thank you.
I know we've already spoken quite a bit, but we're just going to start from the beginning and see where this one goes. Who knows? Maybe we go slightly different, or we go back to some of the things we've already talked about. But we'll start with the usual, the beginnings, like how you got into the sport.
Yeah, so for me, it seems like, listen to most people's story, it's all about the family. So my family's it's a water skiing family, true and true, pure bloods. You know, back a few generations, my granddad, they used to go on holiday in Scotland, my grandparents, and, you know, take my mum and my uncles, and they'll go up there, and one of the places they stayed, they had water skiing, and that was something they really loved. So then he figured out a way to do it in the local place where they lived, which was Tattershall, and he ended up, you know, becoming the chairman of the club and setting it up and doing all that stuff. But he knew he wanted to have his own space, and he found some water in Lincoln, which is, you know, now become Hazelwood Ski World, which is home of the Headwind, all these fun things. They put on pro events, and that's basically where I spent my childhood, was at Hazelwood Ski World, skiing and training and playing, and just generally that was my life.
Yeah. And that's the thing that we were spoken about. You said you didn't know that there was any other option, right? Like you grew up almost not knowing that there wasn't a thing called not water skiing. You see what I mean?
Yeah, exactly. It was such a natural thing for us in the family to be water skiing. Everyone did it. You know, it was we were the first kids in this generation, I would say, of our family. You know, of my parents and my uncles. You know, we're the oldest cousins. So at the beginning, it was, you know, like me and my brother, and then we were at the ski club, and they had members, and I don't ever remember it being an option to not be water skiing.
Right.
If it was just what we did as a family. That was our thing.
And do you remember your first set?
Yeah, I do. We have this thing at the club. It's called the Blue Board, and it's basically like a rectangular thing, and it's got some rocker in it, and it's got some string and some rope to it. And I think most clubs these days have some variation of that at their place. And it was probably just a whimsical thing. And my dad's like, "Hey, let's, you know, go have a play on the Blue Board," or maybe I even asked him to go play on it. And that was probably my first time getting up behind the boat. You know, maybe they even pulled me along the shoreline on the rope. You know, that kind of deal. And we also had a pair of skis around. They were like the Donald Duck skis. They were red with a yellow Donald Duck on them. And that was like the pair of skis that pretty much got every kid up skiing. So I was able to relive my youth over many years and see these kids kind of learn on the same set of skis that I learned to ski on.
Yeah, that's funny how that works sometimes, right? I mean, I've seen it at ski school. Oh, that's the ski I used to ski on, and then you're skiing on it. That's pretty cool. You know?
Yeah, like 20 years later, they're still floating around somewhere. You know, they keep showing up. So in a way, you're able to relive that first experience through that.
Yeah,
through that symbol
skiers.
of beginning to ski. Yeah, that's
right.
cool.
All right, so those were the first days getting on the water. How about your first tournament?
Yeah, I remember this one clearly. It was at Lincoln. We had lots of tournaments. So there's always, you know, growing up, there were big tournaments there. But I mean, it's just, for me, it's part of life. Like those things just went on. I wasn't really aware of maybe what's happening on the water. But there was a kid before me. His name was Michael Bray, and he was just a couple of days older than I was. But he went before me, and he skied, and I saw him. He ran, I think 1.5 on his first pass, and then he fell in, and he swam into shore, and he started playing in the sandpit.
Right.
And all I could think when I was on the start dock, because it took a while for the boat to get to the end and then come back and pick me up, it's like, man, he's playing in the sandpit already. Like, I want to go play in the sandpit. So I put my ski on, and I think I turn around 1, turn around 2, and then cut straight across to him to go play in the sandpit. And then I remember my first score in a tournament was 2 on start speed, because all I wanted to do was go and play.
Right,
Cool.
and that was kind of a consistent thing for you, right? You said like there wasn't an option to be to not be a water skier. That was clear, but you also loved doing other stuff growing up, right?
Yeah, I mean, I didn't really like to tournament water ski. I like to play, and all I really wanted to do was play. So at our club in England, there's kind of 2 lakes. You got the front lake and the back lake, and the back lake's where all the playing happens, and on the front lake's where all the serious stuff happens. You know, it's where all the serious guys go and they train, they do their things. You know, like my brother, he was always 6 sets a day and, getting all his trick slalom, jump, all that stuff in. And all I ever wanted to do was go and play. But, just kind of, I don't know if it's watching my brother do it like so much, and then maybe I wasn't able to, I didn't feel strong enough to do that, maybe because I was a couple of years younger. It was kind of demoralizing, so I just kind of was drawn more to the play side of it.
Okay.
So
Tom was kind of like serious from the beginning? Would that be correct?
All I remember of Tom in the beginning, when I was a kid, like, it was no problem for him to have 6 sets a day. It was no problem for him to, in the winter when we're breaking the ice, he's going to have the 4 trick sets and they're going to be focused. And every time he goes out, he's going to be learning new tricks and doing new things. And I remember when he was a kid, he was, like at 14, he's starting with a back to front flip or,
right.
Which wasn't really a thing back then. He was pretty ahead of his game as far as that stuff. He put the strap on his heel pretty early and kind of got rid of all those line tricks.
Like he was searching early.
Yeah, I think so. I'm not sure where it all came from. It was kind of a little over my head. A lot of the things we learned came from videos.
Right.
We had the VHS and all this stuff from different events. But
were you, so kind of connected to that, were you like consuming that stuff, or was it just like, okay, like were you almost being made to watch them, or were you like interested in watching?
No, I was definitely interested. Yeah, I don't remember taking it serious. I'm not really sure why. My feeling is I wanted to play, but I love watching the videos. Like we had the 95 Worlds in Rockbrunn, or we had a couple of old Masters videos, and then we had a lot of the English ones like the Carlsberg Masters or the Teesside Masters, which are some of the old British tournaments that had, some of the great skiers in them. I just remember that was the way we learned to do things, was to watch some old videos and try and piece it together. Study videos of Wade and Andy, and I always enjoyed slalom. That was always,
your thing. Yeah, but also you told me that at first, maybe because of the environment, your family, Hazelwoods, at first it was about jump. Yeah,
I mean, if you know anything about Hazelwoods, it's jump, jump, jump. I mean, we got, I don't know, like, it's just set up for jump. I mean, it's always a headwind. It's colder water, so it feels nice. And then my family, they're just, everything they do, everything has to be right, or they want it to be right. Like the ramp's always set up, the courses are always set up, they always have strong boats, they always have nice ropes. Like, every kind of step of the way, they've tried to have the right equipment and set it up nicely. But for me, jump was like something I was very passionate about for a long time. And even to this day, I wouldn't say that jump's like left my body of a feeling. I mean, I know I could never do it because I'm just not really the right build for it. But
yeah. And the thing is, yours, like, just diverging back to Hazelwoods for a second, you told me that like Hazelwoods was ahead of the game, or at least they always tried to be ahead of the game, right? Weren't they the first ones to get perfect pass, the first one to get,
Yeah, they always wanted to be kind of ahead of the game. So I remember we were probably the first club in Europe to get perfect pass. Then when Xerox came out, they were right away getting that. And then, we're the first club to have the system that raised and lowers the ramp. And we had the controls on the shore, and it's like, you want to go 5 foot, 5.5, you just spin the dial, ramp goes up, ramp goes down. You got the button there for the water and all this stuff. So I think, like, the story I've always got from Tim and George and my granddad is like, the water skiing has never been, they've never tried to have the water ski club be the business. So they've never treated it necessarily as like a profit loss thing. It's more like, this is our passion, and so anything we're going to do is to make our passion as good as we can make it.
Yeah.
So it was really, if they could get the club to a place where it kind of made enough money to balance itself out, where it maybe didn't lose money, but it wasn't necessarily a place where they're trying to make money from. They had other avenues of business and commercial stuff. But so everything, I just remember it. We got we had the strongest boats when they could have them. If the ramp surface didn't feel right, they'd redo the ramp surface. If the weight was wrong, they would rebalance the ramp. So everything was always geared to jump, not necessarily geared to slalom.
I was going to get there.
So, yeah. I mean, historically, Hazelwoods has not been known for a slalom lake. It was a reclaimed gravel pit, so it was pretty deep, like 20, 30 feet, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
And then the shape of the lake was backfilled. So they would backfill with gravel or rocks or reclaimed building material, that kind of stuff. So it doesn't have any kind of a shelf. So it's basically water to bank.
Mm-hmm.
So it just created this bit of a bathtub effect. So when I was a kid, it was pretty rolly, and it's England, so it's pretty cold. So it kind of made a bit of a hostile slalom environment. But I think looking back, what it made for me was an environment where when I went anywhere else, it kind of made it feel good.
Yeah.
Like I knew I wasn't probably going to get a personal best at Hazelwood, but when I left, I would get at least what I could get at Hazelwoods plus.
And has that been the experience? Like, if you think back, was that what was going on in your early tournaments?
Yeah, it's exactly, yeah. I'd never remember, I'd always hear stories of people like, well, I could do this in practice and I'll get to tournament, I'll be down a couple of passes or buoys or whatever. And I was like, well, that's weird, because anything I do, if I can do it in practice, I'm at least going to do it in tournament. If not, I'm going to PB when I leave the site.
Mm-hmm.
I think it comes down to a few things. I think it's, sure that, back then it wasn't that easy to ski there, but then I know there was, like, my family wouldn't cheat to make me feel better about myself on the day of practice.
Right.
Like I grew up with very straight driving, grew up with, actual times, if not a little bit fast.
Yep.
The ropes are always actual. The course was, homologated several times a year. So everything was super precise and active, not on the easy side, definitely on the hard side. And I think it kind of set up that environment for things being a little bit tougher in practice to then ultimately succeed in competitions.
Yeah. And I wonder, maybe we can get to this later, but I wonder if this is something you can stretch on as you become a better skier, because I think there's a certain point where, like, say at your level, if you need to try 41, like, conditions need to be to a certain level for you to be able to master the pass. I don't know, you see what I mean? Like, yeah. I don't know how long you can stretch that, but certainly it makes a lot of sense, at least to me.
Yeah, I think it does. I think it makes, there's no denying the fact that Hazelwoods has produced champions, not just myself or my brother or my uncle, but lots of other champions, whether they be, Alex Anthony, junior world champion, or Steve Critchley, or Charlotte Wharton, Chris Wharton, so many great names, my uncle Tim, Mike, but so many great names have been through the system, you could say, of the club. And for me, it's just what I always knew. So I didn't really think it was anything different. I didn't realize that was the right or wrong way to do it. And I didn't, it wasn't like I was getting a clear understanding of how anybody else was training in the world, because I didn't have access to anybody else in the world. I was very insulated or very isolated in that regard, and we very much just trained within the family.
And what you were telling me is that despite the fact that you were somewhat isolated, like, I think you told me, like, if I was driving an hour to go ski, it was a bit strange. Yeah. But at the same time, at the club or lakes nearby, there was this bit of, like, internal tournament, right? I'm assuming I'm just putting things here, but maybe you were trying to run 28 off. 14 meters. And there was this 40-year-old guy who was trying to run 28 off. So banter on the dock, I ran it today, you didn't, that sort of thing.
Yeah, so we grew up in England. I think they have a very unique system. And I'm not really sure why the whole world doesn't implement this system, but they have a league system, and it's, Division 4, 3, 2, 1 and Premier. So when you start out, you're Division 4, and, once you reach a certain level of skiing, you go to Division 3, 2, 1 Premier. That's kind of Premier's, Open Elite, whatever it is. So along the way, since I was a kid, I've been competing against people at my exact same level, within reason. And the goal of most of the people at that level is to try and move up in a division. You want to get from 4 to 3, 3 to 2, 2 to 1. And the ultimate goal is to get to Premier. And I had that progression my whole life, but Division 4, you might be competing against someone who's 50 or 60 years old, because, their personal best is something at 32 miles an hour
Mm-hmm.
or whatever the criteria might be. So all the way from day one of competing, I've had little carrots in front of me. I've looked up to the people. If I was in Division 4, I'd look up to the people in Division 3 and be like, wow, that's somebody I think maybe it's attainable to compete against that guy next year.
Right.
And then, and you can imagine when you're in Division 4, you're looking up to the premiers. They're the gods.
Right. Yeah.
In our world, in our bubble. And, I'm not even aware of pro skiing at this point. I don't even know there's a whole different level of
Right.
or European skiing or all that stuff.
See, for me, it was a lot like when I was going to nationals back home, and I would get to see people like, Stefano Palombo or Fabio Ianni, or
Cipollini.
Ciapponi, like ripping through 39. I was like, what? I didn't even know you could do that, right? I think these experiences are important, like when you get to see live in person what is possible. I think it shapes us, doesn't it?
It really does. You've got to. It's nice in life to have someone to aspire to, or a level to aspire to, or the easiest part of my journey, I'd say, has been the climb, in the fact that there's always been somebody there to maybe gain inspiration from, or gain whatever it might be. Like, there's a path, it's already been trailed, like you've got it, it's all good. I think it's become more challenging when you kind of get to the sharper end of that spike, and there's no longer that. I know for sure if I got to the top of the spike, and it's a pretty lonely place, and it's almost like you're running, and then you run off the edge of a cliff and you're just free falling, or you got nothing to hang on to, and you're just kind of left to your own devices. And I think some people, they can manage that quite well, and maybe stay still and just be good with it. But for me, it kind of sent me into a bit of a spiral, and it almost had an uneasy feeling to it. Right. And it maybe took me a few, I'd say even years, to get back to ground, to be able to build a different foundation of an individual foundation to support from, and then kick back off with that.
When would you say that started? Like when did you start that feeling that, it started to become a lonely place? Was it like a certain level that you attained, certain wins you got? Do you remember the time?
Well, I think it was, I'd say it's probably around 2008. I had a pretty good year. I won 8, 9, 10 events, something like that. One in the world. I felt like I had a bit of a, obviously you start to get a feeling you have a decent competitive advantage over the people around you. And then you can just kind of get slapped back pretty quick. Like 2009 wasn't like 2008. People trained hard over the winter, they improved, and then 2009 was not like 2008. Won a couple of events, other people were thereabouts. It's just this, all along the journey, it's been a humbling experience, and in the beginning it kind of sucks to get humbled. It's not a particularly nice feeling, but it's ultimately a really good thing to happen to somebody sometimes. For me, it was great. It was a good thing to bring me down and bring me. I feel better being humbled than not humbled.
Right.
I'd say, definitely. Yeah.
Gives you an idea of what might be missing.
Yeah, it can. I think I got to the point where I was like, I don't really feel like I need to push this anymore. Like, I can just stick here and I'll just ride this out for a while, and I'll.
It's working, right? So why changing?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it's working, so why not change it? And it kind of stuck around there for a year or two, and that was fine. But then the levels progress, and the people around you, they're not stood still. They're working hard. They're working harder than you could imagine that somebody could, and they're improving. And people you didn't think maybe could run that amount of buoys, they figure stuff out, new equipment, new training, whatever. And it's just it's a forever challenging experience. Even coming on like 20 years of doing this, and the challenge has not got less.
Oh, for sure.
I mean,
for sure.
Even I'd say the last 3-4 years is more challenging than it's ever been. as far as ability levels. And
let's go to a few different challenges. I'd be curious to hear the early challenges, right?
Yeah.
So eventually you got out of your bubble of Hazelwoods, UK, about an hour drive far. What were the first like experiences maybe abroad, or like first big tournaments like?
Yeah, I wasn't super aware of much outside of my bubble. I mean, for me I was kind of spoiled where we're at Hazelwoods, back to that, but within an hour of Hazelwoods, there was like 10 ski lakes, 10 competition ski lakes. And
which is crazy, like it's not...
You don't really think about that in England, but I think maybe because it's big gravel pit area or sand mines, that kind of stuff. And it was, I know the British Federation in the early years really kind of, this is my granddad's time. He was the chairman of the British Federation, and I think they kind of built that whole club mentality and built the thing of, here's the blueprint for it. You need a boat, you need some club members. This is how you make it happen. And in different areas, lots of people were able to make that happen. So for me, growing up, I would compete at a lot of different events, but rarely more than an hour from my house. It would be every weekend. There'll be something, whether it's South Lake or Lound or Nottingham or whatever. There's a ton of different clubs. And that was kind of my younger year experience. And then my first real international experience was being picked for the British team. And they used to have one called the Three Nations, Italy, England, and France, I believe. And it was in Ravenna, Italy.
Oh, okay.
That was my first international event. I think that was in like 1994. And yeah, that was kind of my first experience of seeing people not speaking English.
Right.
Water skiing,
Right.
which was kind of weird. Then you get to see, you got these kids, obviously we're all kids, and they've got their coaches and they're taking it very serious, and they're flying their flags and they've got the team tracksuits, and
Right.
that was all very exciting as a kid. I remember that. But I'll tell you one thing, that really screwed me up for school back home, because the one thing I realized is that everybody speaks English, which was not really good for me. I went back to high school, and I remember saying to the French teacher, I'm like, why am I going to learn French? Like everyone speaks English.
Yeah.
Very, very young, naive outlook on it. I wish now I'd picked up on the languages, but
yeah, no, it's especially us being from Europe, like despite you guys are a little bit of an island outside of the mainland, it's just so easy to meet people from different cultures that speak different languages.
Right. I guess you were more exposed to lots of different skiers at a young age than...
Oh, I was because at ski school, when I was really young, Claudio already was building his name around Europe, so we had skiers from Switzerland. So that's already two languages outside of Italian. Because there's a part of Switzerland that speaks Italian, but then you have French and German. Yeah. Then Austria, Germany, some skiers from around, some French skiers. So, but then again, I didn't speak all those languages. So my strategy was I was learning English in school. Let me try to speak English with these older people than me, and it worked out.
I was wondering where your English came from, because your dad doesn't speak a lick of it.
Nope, no. But he regrets it, like
sure.
Kind of like what you experienced, like thinking back, right? He really regrets it not to pay attention in school. But then I think it's also your environment, right? Yeah. Like you didn't have the need for it because everyone speaks English. My dad grew up in a farm, so what is he going to, Yeah. As he said to me oftentimes, English is not going to feed the cows.
Yeah, I could see that. Yeah. Also with me, everyone wanting to practice their English on me.
Exactly.
So it's almost it's double negative for me. Yeah. I mean, not double negative. I got to speak to a lot of cool people. Yeah. I mean, the only words I could probably speak of any foreign language are not good words you ever want to repeat.
Yeah, exactly. That's what you don't let junior Europeans, the bad words in everybody's language.
Well, what happened to me, my second trip was to Czechoslovakia.
Ooh, yeah.
Yeah. And so my first was in Italy, my second was in Czechoslovakia, and that was in Krenek, I believe. They had like a yellow ramp.
Yeah, weird. I remember those.
Yellow or blue. I think that might have been the first time I ever encountered T-gas, unless he was in Ravenna and I didn't realize it. But yeah, that was kind of a cool Yeah, they were really exciting times looking back.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And they came, and we spoke about it, like they came from a different also, I don't know how to say this, like I'm trying to compare it to like a young kid in the United States or Canada or like these bigger countries, like away from Europe. It's kind of like you grow up in your own lake, maybe you're a part of a ski school, but maybe not. And you grew up skiing with mom and dad, and then eventually you go to a tournament, but everyone speaks English, so that's not a huge change,
Mm-hmm.
right? Whereas then, and there certainly weren't readily available internet rankings. Like, so you literally showed up and like,
Yeah.
ooh, who's that guy? Or, okay, oh, he can ski well, all right. Like, you know, like it was all very new from the beginning, I would say, no?
Yeah, for most of my junior, you know, Bambino, Dauphine, junior, I started to recognize some faces, but you know, up until, you know, under 14, under 16, I didn't really know who anybody was.
Right.
I'd show up to an event. I got picked for the team, so I knew I was good relative to England.
Yeah.
What does that mean? Not
Right.
that much. And then I knew I was at a foreign place, and I knew normally if I left my site in England, I'd at least be able to do what I did at home. So, you know,
Yeah.
I was always pretty strong as far as my performances. If there's a score on the ranking list, you could almost guarantee that's what I was going to do
Mm-hmm.
at a tournament. But as a junior, I didn't know that there was like a ranking list, and
Right.
you know, I didn't follow that there were other people in my situation around the world kind of doing the same thing and competing and traveling and
Yeah,
preparing.
and there
for
wasn't
these
like
big
a
events.
life of a water skier hashtag that you could go to at age 13 and go, okay, I know this person. I've seen him online for 2 years. Oh, now I see them live at a ski lake. What's the difference, right? Like at the time, it was a bit different.
And also at that time, it was like, just because somebody won one year didn't mean they were going to be there the next year. So it was, you know, we didn't really get that consistency of athletes until, you know, more into the juniors or,
Yeah.
right, you know, first, second, definitely the juniors is kind of when it got a bit more consistent.
Right.
But
So let me ask you, I'd be curious to hear this, because you certainly are someone who made it through the system, and, you know, whichever system, you know, like whether it was your club or the British national team, and we'll talk about those years. But you made it through, and then you eventually got into the open category and became one of the best skiers of all time. But I'm sure that as you were growing up as a dolphin or junior, you remember some skiers that were super talented or very good that eventually faded away, right?
well, yeah, I mean, there's, a lot.
You know?
A lot, yeah. So, the biggest name that comes to me is a French guy, Patrick Julien Esnard, and I don't know if you know that name.
No.
But I mean, he was a phenomenal skier, and then one year he just didn't show up, and he actually had a bad motorcycle accident, and he had complications with his leg, and you know, he wasn't able to ski to that level anymore. But as a kid, he was like my rival.
Yeah.
He was like the guy that I'm like, how am I going to compete against this guy? I mean, when I was 14, he's like, you know, he wasn't a white guy, he's a black guy, but he's big and built. Like when we were 14, I'm looking at this guy, he's got biceps like this, and he's pecs and his six pack, and I'm looking at him like, man, you're a specimen
Right.
from God. I don't even know. Like, how am I supposed to compete? And his scores were there and all this stuff. And so, yeah, he was like one of my big motivations when I was a kid to like, well, if I'm ever going to do anything European level, I got to compete against this guy. He's, you know, he's brought down from the heavens. He's no way he's my age. They forged his passport.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think, you know, I guess it's normal in all the sports, and you know, like you grow up and then you see people kind of phasing in and out. But I just find it interesting how those early competitive experiences push us, right? So for me, I had Stelio Merolla. He was right in Italy. We were toe-to-toe from 14 until 20, right?
Yeah.
So it was actually like I had it more readily available. He lived in Naples, so it was we never really skied together, but we would ski at tournaments together, even locally. And I just think you know, I think there's a lot of people that shaped us into the skiers we are. They might not be around now. They don't ski anymore, or they didn't progress. But sometimes it's interesting to think back and like, wow, if he wasn't there, would have reached that level, right?
Yeah. No, you don't really think about it until, I guess, after the fact of how that may have influenced your careers along the way.
Yeah.
As far as, it's more evident now in the pro side. People come and go quite frequently. Like you're there one year, you're not there the next, or you can have a run for a year or two, and then suddenly you can't piece it back together.
Right.
And you definitely get influenced or challenged by these people along the way. LaPointe always said to me, it's one thing to have, one season or 2 seasons, but to be able to roll that into a whole career takes a whole different kind of growth out of an athlete.
Yeah.
You've got to be able to evolve. You've got to be able to change who you are or the way you approach things.
I bet that was an interesting conversation from a couple of people that actually managed to do it. I would say you and Bob are like clear examples of people that managed to reinvent themselves, stay competitive with a new wave of talent,
Yeah, and I've learned so much from Bob and Chris both, but they've been through it. They've been through it since they were 13 years old, getting their first world titles, world records, and they know what it means to kind of have longevity in a sport.
Right.
Like for it to go through the cycles, how do you stay ahead of the curve? How do you at least stay with the curve?
Yeah.
That's definitely a challenge in this sport as technologies advance, speed controls change, which, can completely change the game for somebody. It can give somebody that had the complete advantage to having a complete disadvantage, or vice versa. You can...
Sorry, minor parenthesis. Do you think that's what happened 08, 09 for you?
Well,
sorry, just to give some context, like that's when Zero Off came out, right?
Yeah, so Zero Off came out, I think the first time we had it was Dabbler Shores 2006. We skied qualifying rounds with Perfect Pass. We skied head-to-head with Zero Off.
Wow.
Nobody had skied with Zero Off. No one even knew what it was, really. A couple of people had it. So right away, I won that tournament.
Oh, you won it?
Yeah, so for the first, I think, 2 years, two or something years, I won every event that had Zero Off.
Interesting.
Because it wasn't, in the beginning, it wasn't all Zero Off. It was some Perfect Pass, some Zero Off.
That's true.
Zero Off came along and I took to it. I don't know, it always suited the way I skied for some reason. I'm not exactly sure why. Some people it did not suit very well.
Yeah.
Some people had a very, very hard time with it. But what was the question?
Yeah, no, why maybe, because you had mentioned that like in 2008 you had a great season.
Yeah.
Then 2009 not so great. And if I'm not mistaken, in terms of like commercial availability of Zero Off, those were kind of the years. Yeah,
and I got with Malibu and they were great. They had 2 ECMs on the boat, so I could have both Perfect Pass and Zero Off. So I was able to train with both. So they gave me the advantage with that. But really, the season of 2008 comes back to the kind of changing of the guard with HO.
Right.
So we may want to put that
Save
one
that
on
for later.
Put that one on freeze for a minute, because 2008 was kind of the peak of that drive.
Sounds good. Yeah, so, I thought I was piecing something together, but clearly I didn't.
Yeah, no, it's a little bit of a longer story, but yeah.
We'll get to it. Hey, I hope you enjoyed the episode so far. As you can imagine, we took a lot of breaks because we spoke for over 4 hours. So I'm taking the opportunity to use this break to tell you to subscribe to the Waterski Bits. If you haven't checked them out yet, you can find them on Spotify, on Apple. And what I'm doing with the Waterski Bits is essentially taking the best parts or parts of interviews from the extensive vault by now that I have with the Waterski podcast and just put them there. 5 to 10 minutes bits. There's Marcus talking about how the idea of the free ride came about rather than some of Nick Parsons' ideas about skis, how Robert ended up winning the Pan Am Games. So there's a bit of extracts from the interviews that I've done so far. Now, why would you want to subscribe to that? Well, easier listening in terms of 5 to 10 minutes. And I will be posting parts of 1.0 interview with Will exclusively on the waterski bits. So these are not going to be bits taken from the 3 parts that you listen to this podcast, but stuff that he said and we spoke about right before my computer decided to abandon us. So really, if there's an incentive to subscribe to the waterski bits, I would say that's the one, or the most recent one at least. So yeah, you can find the waterski bits on Apple, Spotify, Google Podcast, and all the good other rest of apps. Break over. Let's get back to the interview. All right, so let's take a little step back, because I like what you said about your conversation with Bob in terms of like longevity, but a career has to start somewhere, right? And I think you were telling me how your first world championship was a junior world championship.
Oh yeah, I mean, this isn't a secret now, but we're on podcast 2.0.
Right, yeah.
So in the first, you asked me, is there a point in my career that you want to prime that one again?
What did I ask you?
You asked me, is there something that stands out in your career that maybe influenced you, or something that happened something along those lines?
Yeah, it was, yeah.
Maybe a setback.
A little bit of a setback or a turning point, you know?
Yeah, for me, it comes back, the one that stands out earliest in my career, I'd say, was the Junior Worlds in 1998.
Right.
And it was in Dijon in France. And I believe I didn't realize, but I think I was ranked number 1 in the world in junior slalom. I didn't really have access to a ranking list, but somebody had told me. And, we get there, and for the prelims, it's basically like, the last worlds we had in France, whereas white capping, tailwind, first pass, like, what do you do?
Right.
And at the time, I didn't really have a ton of experience of how to really deal with that. I didn't necessarily have my team around me. The culture in England was very much, you've got your team captain, and the parents are forcefully encouraged to back the fuck off, basically.
Okay.
And for me, I'd say that wasn't really a great thing, because I grew up skiing with my parents. Like, my dad was like, he was my support system throughout my whole junior side.
Right.
Training would be my driver. He wasn't a water skier growing up, but he'd do anything he could to make it work.
But he also was an athlete, so he probably understood what it's required to perform at a certain level, right?
Yeah, so now, knowing what you know about sport, like, that's sometimes way more important than to have somebody that knows what's going on, or really understands the sport, because that can cloud what is actually going on. So yeah, my dad was a phenomenal athlete, grew up rugby, England trials. He was at the top level of rugby in England before it became professional.
Yeah.
And like, stories as a kid was, he would cycle to rugby practice, which wasn't close, like 10, 15 miles, do his rugby practice, 2.5 hours, whatever, running, all this kind of stuff, then cycle back. So I grew up around somebody that was definitely an athlete, and, definitely he prided himself on being the athlete, and he was regarded within, his community, hardest tackler in the league, all these kind of cool things.
Yeah.
But anyway, back to the world story, he was encouraged to not be around the start dock, because I think in the past they'd maybe had bad situations with parents where they were kind of a pain in the ass, which,
they still are.
They still are. It can be a thing, but my dad wasn't that guy. Like, he knew what was going on, and but I had to make a decision, white capping tailwind, the scores weren't very high. It was maybe like deep 35 to make 12 to make the final. I'm like, well, it'd be nice to have a couple of passes. Like, normally I go out at 14, so that'd be just like basically 14, 13, 12. That'd be my third pass.
Right.
It doesn't feel like enough passes. So I somehow, I asked my team coach, I'm like, well, maybe I'll just go out at 18. Got long line. They'll give me 18, 16, 14, 13. It gives me my 4 passes before my hardest pass, which I still like to do this day. Oh yeah, it sounds like a great idea. Why wouldn't that be a good idea? Got
Right.
an easier pass, like almost guaranteed to run it. Well, kind of short story long. I come around 1 ton of slack line, got way too much line to deal with. Came out to 2, and I fell at 2. So 1.5 buoys, start speed, junior worlds. That was a pretty tough pill to swallow. It was a pretty hard one. Yeah.
And when in podcast 1.0, I remember asking you how that experience was, what you learned, and you told me probably that you don't start a long line. Like that was the extent of, I guess, of your analytics at the time.
Yeah, it was like I think because I you kind of progress past it, so maybe you forget, but I hadn't been on long line for many
years.
Maybe a couple of years. I don't even know, like a year or two. And especially not in those kind of conditions. If I did it, it was probably on a calm day, and it was just because I wanted to run more past. Like, it wasn't a big deal. But I definitely learned a big lesson on that day, that just because it's a longer line doesn't mean it's an easier pass.
Mm-hmm.
And that definitely rings true now. You know, I couldn't even, for me, I think I'd struggle to start at 14 even.
Right.
You know, I never do it, and I know I've done it from time to time. I'll do it because, like before Worlds in France, I went 14 a few passes just because I knew it was going to be windy and these kind of things, just so you know what to expect.
Yeah.
It
takes a little, line comes a little earlier. Yeah, all those weird things of the past that you don't normally train, right?
Yeah, it's like the boat's always going to be on you. You're not going to rely on that freedom or the release from the boat. Just be comfortable with never feeling early and free.
Yeah.
But that was kind of a early slap in the face, crush to the ego at quite a young age. But at the time, I wasn't even really that focused on slalom. I thought the jump was going to be my event.
And you told me you actually did okay in jumping that event, no?
Yeah, I ended up coming fourth. I got a PB. It was like 46.8 meters, something like that. But I remember in practice, I was like, well, shit, there's no way in the world anyone in the world is going to be jumping more than 46, 47 meters. Like, I'd heard stories of Dane Puxty and Jimmy Seamers, they would jump in 53, 54, but I'm like, they're in like, bullshit American tournaments.
Right.
Cheating driving. Like, there's no way they're going to come over to Dijon in France and jump that far. Well, they did. They came over there, and I think Jimmy jumped 54, and him and Dane had the most epic battle I can ever remember.
Wow.
Jumping, 53, 8, 54, 55, those kind of, that was exciting.
Was Tom at that tournament, or was he already under 21?
He was already out.
Ah, okay.
Yeah. So I only had one junior world, so I'm an even baby.
Yeah.
So I didn't get the two.
Yeah, neither did I.
No. Yeah, my brother got one as well. Yeah.
Yeah. So no, because I was thinking back. Well, then you didn't even have your brother, because
No.
I understand the parents sort of like situation with the national team.
Mm-hmm.
Hey, stay away. Let the skiers do the skiing.
Yeah.
But at least if you had your brother who would have been a skier, at least you could have asked him, hey Tom, it's 18 or 14 or 16 or whatever, right?
Yeah.
But you didn't have that.
No, I didn't have that, and we didn't really have the strongest junior team at that time either. I think it was like, not on the guys' side anyway. I think we had a really strong tricker and a couple of girls that were pretty good. But I was the kind of the guy on the team, essentially. Yeah. So I didn't have a support system for that decision, which now, as it kind of progressed past that, quite a few things changed in my life as far as, the way the funding came into the British Federation. And
I was going to go there, yeah.
Yeah.
Explain a little bit of that. Like, were you already funded by the time you went to Junior Worlds?
So how it used to be, before like 1999, I'd say, all like international events were funded, but nothing beyond that. So it wasn't like we had training funded or trout. Our trip was free essentially.
Right.
They paid all that stuff. But then after that, we got a funding in the British Federation called National Lottery, which was, world-class performance, which was funded by National Lottery. And we had a performance director, John Wood. And that was the biggest turning point in my skiing. And that made the biggest change or the biggest turnaround for me, from being kind of a clueless skier to being exposed to certain things outside of my bubble.
Yeah.
Because, I grew up very insulated in that way. I didn't get to ski with many people outside of my bubble. which got me to a good level,
I would say.
But then after that, it really progressed after that. We got some coaches from outside. We had Matt Reaney would come to our lake for a couple of weeks at a time. And Mike Ferraro came, Ray Stokes would come. And one thing, and it was always encouraged to come to our place at Hazelwoods because the site was always set up. We always had the best boats. The ramp was always set up. We could house people. It wasn't that busy in the week.
Yeah.
But for me, just getting exposed to those people that already had international exposure was pretty big for me and taught me some pretty big lessons.
Now, was that what made you change from, I'll ski, but I'm really into playing? Was that sort of like extra addition, or by then were you already a little bit more, shall I say, committed to tournament water skiing?
No, I wasn't. I wouldn't say I was committed until that switch, because it went from being, family coached, whereas it's pretty well known that sometimes a father-son relationship can be a little testy at times.
Yeah, particularly if you throw sports in there.
You throw sports, and then you start to throw puberty and all that fun stuff, and I know best, and who are you?
Right.
Maybe it wasn't the. But then it was nice to have somebody come from the outside and kind of take that pressure off us, in a way, and it kind of forced us to train, because they had this coach come in from out of town, out of state, out of country. They're here for this. If you're going to be here, you're skiing. We're skiing for a purpose, training for a team, training for a competition. That was probably the biggest change in my life. And at that time, because of the funding, they opened the whole world up for different things. So we had access to psychologists, personal trainers, nutritionists, fitness tests, all these kind of things that would essentially any other pro athlete would be doing.
Yeah.
So the criteria that's put on us was very similar to the criteria of, say, like the national rowing team. They would be expected to do these things, meet these criteria,
The funding is there. We are providing you with the services. You make sure you maximize those opportunities.
Yeah. So, every year, once or twice a year, we'd have to do a fitness test, and John would be like, okay, you got to make yourself available for this, train for it if you can. First one was miserable because I didn't really know what the hell I was doing. So I was hungry on the way, so we stopped and got McDonald's.
Right.
So at that point,
went well.
It's like, looking back, you don't know what you're doing. It's a fitness test. Like, what can a fitness test mean?
Right.
You can't think that you're going to be on a rowing machine trying to do lactic threshold sprints like an hour after eating a McDonald's. And you can imagine what happened.
Yeah, exactly.
Like, that McDonald's did not stay in my stomach.
Yeah, I bet.
Yeah, or we're doing, running bleep tests or all these things, which really at the time didn't make any sense to me. Like, I didn't see the value in it. I didn't know it was important. Now, if I did it, it would be a completely different story.
Right.
I would know exactly how to take full advantage of that situation. I would know the information I wanted. I would know if the test wasn't, if I didn't think it was relevant for our sport, I think I'd be able to communicate in a way like, hey, I think we can tweak it this way and this way, and it become more appropriate for us.
Yeah, so probably part of the fact that you have more knowledge about the sport, you're obviously an adult now.
Yeah.
You've had experiences, right? And I'm assuming the thinking might have gone something like, how is this going to help me run more buoys? Like, you didn't see it.
No, I didn't see it at all.
Yeah.
I'm like, well, you have me doing a running bleep test. I only ski for like 5 or 10 minutes, and
Exactly.
It's like 16 seconds. Like, but they were just trying to get some sort of an average measure of,
Fitness rather than,
trying to get benchmarks, so then maybe they can apply it and you can make improvements from one year to the next.
Yeah.
I mean, that's all they were doing. But it just showed me that there was a whole different side to different sports.
Mm-hmm.
And, for a lot of years after that, I took it very seriously, and I trained and I put the time in.
Because that's kind of how, I would say, the perception of you in the ski world, right, nowadays, or I would say in the last 10, 15 years, is of someone that works extremely hard, extremely dedicated to the craft. So it's interesting to hear that, like, in those early days, it was a bit of like, you didn't see the point in that, right?
Yeah. Well, I mean, my dad and my brother will laugh because I didn't like to kind of get my heart rate up when I was a kid. So the big thing we did when we played squash, like my dad was a phenomenal squash player and my brother was really good at squash as well. And I didn't beat them. I think I maybe beat my brother one time in college at squash, but I think he was just going easy on me. But I just didn't want to do it. I don't know why. I was kind of lazy. I don't know. I don't remember, some of my friends that be on the cross country team, or all those kind of things. I didn't want to. Yeah, I didn't want to do any of that stuff. I just wanted to kind of play on the back lake with 3 people behind a boat, and
A little funny thinking back how we can change, right?
Yeah, and I don't really know exactly what the shift was. It was probably just having some of this exposure, and then you kind of get to, you meet different people, or I know my dad had been saying it to me for quite a few years. It's like, he had his experience with rugby and his different sports, but if you want to improve, you've got to take the off water as serious as you do on the on water.
Yeah.
So I always had that ringing in the back of my mind. I never took advantage of it when he said it. Sorry. But I think the words were still there. And then when I got a little bit older and some of this world-class stuff, and then we had some personal trainers that wrote up programs for us, and I got to work with some really cool people that did stuff that I thought was really creative and fun and challenged me in a way that I didn't think I could be challenged.
Yeah.
I got to work with a guy called Kai Fusa, and he works with a lot of the top golfers in the world. So when I was in college, he would, I'd fly into Orlando. He's based in Orlando. He'd write me up a program, 6 or 12 week block. And then I'll go back to college, go back to Reds, and I'll do my
physical training part.
Physical training off the water stuff, yeah.
Now, you threw in some pretty big names in water skiing, like Matt Rini, Ray Stokes, Mike Ferraro. I mean, these are like well-established, highly regarded coaches. Do you remember any sort of like maybe early eye-openers that they give you? Something that were like, whoa, like why have I not been doing this forever,
So for some reason I didn't use a wing until I ran 38 off. I remember that. And I went to British Nationals and I won British Nationals, and I ran 38 off 11. I got one at 10.75 and I won Nationals. And around that time we started skiing with Matt Rini, and Matt's like, I think you probably need to put this wing on. I think it might help you a little bit. And I remember putting that on, and it went from, scrapping a 38 to then starting to chip away at 39. But a lot of my bad habits came from not having a wing, I would say. Like, I didn't have the control of load, I didn't have the control of speed. So a lot of my big counter rotations or jumping on the front of the ski or some of these things that I still to this day have a hard time to get rid of could be due to some of that stuff.
And it's interesting.
And it's not that anyone was doing it, because they were trying to hurt me. It's just what we believed to be true at the time.
Yeah. And so, because you told me in 1.0 how like your early experiences with testing equipment, which is obviously an integral part of what you do now, was to just unscrew mommy's fin block, put it on your ski, and see how that felt. Yeah, so all those fins had no wings, or were you just taking the wing off?
I don't think they had wings. I mean, this was before. This is like 1994 or something. We all had the similar skis with the same fin box, but everyone's fin was a little bit different. Didn't have calipers, didn't have any of that stuff. But I was like, well, I want to try different stuff. So I basically take my mom's fin off, put it on my ski, take my dad's off, put it on my ski, my brother's, whatever. Yeah. I probably didn't mess with Tom's that much. But I remember the one I skied the best on was my dad's fin. And he's like, well, that doesn't make any sense because it's set up for me.
Right.
But now we know it's just a number and it's a feeling, and sometimes. Right.
Now, going back to those years, you had one experience that really opened your eyes in terms of equipment.
Yeah. So when in 99 we were training in England, and the weather just got so bad, but the whole team back when we had funding decided to fly out to Florida. We had the opportunity to go ski with Andy at his place, and I got there and I was skiing on my ski, and my ski broke. And, you know, what do you do? I'm there for like 3 weeks. I don't have another ski. And Andy was like, well, you know, try my ski. I was like, oh shit, okay. And he's like, but when you put your foot in the binding, don't laugh. I was like, what the hell is he talking about? So I put my foot in the binding, and there's no padding on the inside. The bottom of the plate's been cut out. Like my foot's like directly on the ski.
Okay.
So if you know legends of Andy's bindings, they're
Yeah.
like basically flip flops with no base on them. It was kind of a trippy thing at the time. But I remember, you know, my best was maybe 1 at 39, you know, British national champion, hot shit. And I went out there and I basically on his ski went out and I ran 39 back to back. And then from that point forward, my head was kind of blown. Like I didn't know. I came in after the set and I was like, hey, what's the chance of me getting the ski? He's like, there's no chance. Like,
Right.
you know, he basically like took the ski off me as quick as he could. But for the next couple of years, I was like, well, I guess that's how a ski's meant to feel. You know, and I went on some pretty big searches to try and find, you know, obviously I got the ski I thought that was, you know, it was a 68 O'Brien, and then try to set it up, trying to learn how he had it set up. But, you know, it took me a while to figure that one out.
Yeah. Yeah, no, and to me, the way I know you, that was probably the beginning of the journey you've been on for the last, I don't know, 20 years, right? Sense of like trying to better understand equipment.
Yeah. So I knew from when I was 16, I guess I'm capable of running 39 off. You know, I did it in practice, and from what I know, anything from my childhood, if I can do it in practice, I'll do it in tournament.
Right.
You know, I learned that as a young age. And I'm pretty sure Andy wasn't weaving for me. So I knew I could do it. Technique-wise, I'm like, well, I guess I'm good enough. I guess I don't have to work on technique that much. All I got to do is figure out the ski thing. So I kind of went on this search, and I remember I'd like sand on a bevel, and like, what the hell business did I have sanding on a bevel? I didn't know the first thing about it. I just know that Andy had like a white strip on his 135. Now looking back, I'm like, I don't know if he had it sharper, softer, was it flatter, did he have more crown, was it bigger, small, like could have been infinite amount of things.
Exactly.
But it kind of set the ball rolling for me, is that obviously there's something that could be on my foot that could be a lot better than what I have. So if I'm not to the point where I'm running 39 off, then obviously the ski's not good enough, because I'm good enough because I've done it.
Yeah.
So that was kind of a big thing for me, and maybe started that whole trend towards tweaking with equipment and these kind of things. You know, got back and Dad bought me a caliper, and we kind of got those things. You know, started to get figured out.
Trying to figure out.
Had the notebook, had all these kind of things.
Yeah, yeah. And so from those years, if my memory doesn't fail me, 2 or 3 years more in Europe. I'm assuming, you know, still being in this system, doing European championships, and all these sort of things, and then eventually moved to the US for college.
Yeah, so I went to Bennett's for a fall, and then in 2001 or 2002 started college.
Yeah.
And it was basically just following my brother at that point. He, you know, from England, he went to Bennett's. He trained there, and you know, like I grew up training with my brother, so I wanted to follow him. I wanted to continue training around, or be around him to be training. I mean, he was always the guy I looked up to as a kid, and you know, tried to emulate or beat.
Right.
In a sense, you know, he was my carrot my whole life, and he was 2 years ahead of me, and he was stronger and, you know, better in a lot of events. So we went to Bennett's, and then he went to Lafayette. So then the natural progression for me was to then go to Lafayette.
Yeah.
And do the college thing,
Yeah.
which I didn't know anything about college skiing. I didn't know if it was going to be. I wasn't necessarily like a good student as a kid. Like I didn't particularly do very well in high school. I was kind of got in trouble. I was a little bit misguided, maybe hung out with the wrong crowd. So college was never really on the table for me, or at least I didn't think it was. It wasn't my goal. My goal was always, I'm going to be a professional water skier. That's it.
Yeah, yeah.
Then the opportunity came along. Brother went there. He was enjoying it. Met some other guys that were on the team. They were like, hey, it'd be great if you came on the team too. And
stacked team in those years. I mean, if you want to drop some names, there were a lot of great skiers there.
Oh,
I mean,
man.
Dane, who you remember from Junior Worlds.
Yeah, Dan. Yeah, I remember that name. So I was pretty keen to go hang out with him and train with him. And cool guy, Trent Finlayson. Everyone knows him these days. We had Mandy Nightingale, my brother. We had Felipe Miranda, Mikkel Anderson, Casey Mama. Like, we had a really stacked team.
Yeah.
Just a great group of guys and girls to kind of grow up with, I would say. And in a way, I'd say that college kind of saved my life. It took me out of, I guess it made me believe that I wasn't like the stupid kid from high school that wasn't really capable of getting an education. It was never really my thing.
Okay.
You know, I never had anything in my childhood to tell me I would be any good at school. You know, I pieced it together. I got enough qualifications to make me eligible to go to college. But it wasn't like, you know, high school, A student, knew exactly on a plan what I was going to do the whole way through.
Yeah, it wasn't like, maybe in the skiing bit, the progression made sense and you were, you know, making certain steps that made you look forward, but in terms of school, maybe not so much.
Exactly. Yeah, I didn't see a path in school. I mean, I didn't see it in my future in a way. I mean, it was just probably the random encounter that my brother had to bring him to college that brought me to college.
Yeah.
Probably if he hadn't gone to Lafayette, there's no way I would have gone to Lafayette.
So what was his encounter? How did he end up there? I mean, he was at Bennett's.
I think that was it. Yeah, probably like it happened to a lot of people. He needed a place to go ski. I don't know who his influence was to go to Bennett's, but you know, ended up there. I remember him saying, you know, it was great to go there, and Jay was always great about having quite a big staff. So
yeah.
At the time, they had a lot of great people to ski with. You know, it was like Nick Botcher and Danny Budd and some of these just great skiers.
Yeah.
And it was just a great environment to learn in, and especially when we were there, it was like me, Tom, Damien, Danny Budd, Nick Botcher. There's like a ton of people that are taking it very serious. Lots of people that could jump over 200 feet.
Yeah.
Still not known for a slalom place.
No.
So I kind of get myself in this trap again, where I'm a wannabe slalom skier, kind of frowned upon because everyone wants to be on the jump lake. But like, you know, Jay always stuck me in the slalom boat. He's like, well, you're the slalom skier, like you go in the slalom boat. But all I wanted to do was be in the jump boat. Like I wanted to be the guy coaching jump. I wanted to be, because jump was really my passion.
Mm-hmm.
As far as slalom, I always did well in slalom, I guess you could say.
You could say.
But I also did well in jump. So, you know, I'm junior European jump champion, you know, these kind of things. So I found myself, anyway, we're at Bennett's.
Yeah, a bit of a conflict, right? And I would agree with that. Like Bennett's, obviously, Jay is, you know, highly regarded as one of the best jump coaches of all time. And I remember the walk to Lake 2. It's a bit of a lonely walk, you know, like you're going there, maybe you have a buddy that is pulling you who's into slalom, and then there's all this action on the dock at Lake 1, people wanting to jump, you know. So it is a bit of a, I mean, and this is not to take away from Jay, actually on the contrary. Like he had a slalom lake and it was set up and you could ski and it was a good slalom boat. But as you were walking towards Lake 2, I mean, at least I would turn back and see like 9 jumpers on dock at Lake 1 just stoked to jump, you know?
I mean, and that was me too. Like I want to be on Lake 1 jumping. Like I was super passionate about Lake 1 jumping. And but it was pretty tough to find someone that could actually pull you slalom. I remember like asking Damien, be like rolling his eyes, or
right.
I mean, Tom would always pull me, no problem. But then at that point, he was already in college, so he would there, you know, kind of be there on the weekends. It was it's kind of weird to think that it'd be hard to find someone that could pull you slaloming.
Yeah,
or even
nowadays it's a little weird, being unthinkable almost. Yeah.
Yeah. But even at that point, I didn't think the jump was going to be out of my life. Like, so it was I still fit in on the jump lake. You know, I could jump over 200 feet. So I could hang with the boys in a sense.
Oh yeah, you got the ticket for Lake 1, that's for sure.
I got the Lake 1 ticket. It's okay. People wanted to ride in the boat when I ski. I mean, that was okay. That was nice. And I always remember, like, one of my funniest jump stories was when I was a junior, and it was back to, you know, my big rival, which was this Patrick Julian S-Knot guy.
Yeah.
So I think I can't remember if I won, maybe I won slalom. He was kicking my ass in overall because I was an overall skier as well. And then it came to the jump final, and he was after me, and I'll never forget what he said to me. Like, he had his jump stuff, I had my stuff on. He's like, "You have really good technique, but you do not have the balls to beat me." I was like, "You motherfucker."
Whoa.
Yeah.
Whoa. That's a strong thing to say on a dock.
It was a very strong thing to say on the dock before the jump final, because if I have ever had a fire lit up my ass, was on that day. I remember I went out and I jumped like 50.7 meters, white capping crosswind, like no reason to be jumping very far in those conditions. He went out, he did not jump as far as me, and I ended up beating him in overall by 0.6 of a company.
What?
So I beat him in jump and overall, and I don't remember if I won slalom or not. I didn't really care at the time. I was there for overall. But
Wow.
I was kind of like back to my legendary jump, one of my better jump feats.
Interesting one. But so anyway, it's yet again in another place where slalom is maybe not the most done event.
Yeah.
And you decided to go.
Yeah. I didn't really know where else to go. It's funny because a lot of the things I did were revolving around jump. You know, we had Ray Stokes as a coach.
Yeah.
I mean, we were literally jumping like 4 times a day. You know, you wake up in the morning, you'd ride your skis a couple of times, you'd do some single cuts, you do some double cuts.
Yeah.
So like, and then maybe somewhere in there you'd throw a slalom set, and tricking was off the board. Ray was in town, you weren't tricking. But, so to be in a place where slalom wasn't necessarily the focus wasn't a big deal to me. I was like, oh, I kind of piece this together in a way. And I remember there, and then Sully moved back to Bennett's. So I was like, oh, sweet. Like, there's this other guy that's like super committed to slalom, and he wants to get into it. And we ended up doing some skiing together.
Nice.
And that was kind of nice. Yeah, that kind of picked up the whole, for me, like the energy level of skiing and having somebody else that's as serious as I am trying to do it.
Yeah, no, that makes a difference, right? When you get to train with someone that is maybe, possibly at your level, but even if not that, just like passionate like you, to wanting to improve in what you love. Right?
Yeah, because I'd never actually been around a slalom specialist. Like I can't even think of anyone in my, you know, growing up where I was training with somebody or skiing or in the environment of somebody that was a slalom specialist. Mm-hmm. So I never really had that. I think my fear was always if I quit trick and jump, then there's gonna be too much pressure on slalom. I'm not gonna be able to cope with that pressure.
Right.
And it's something about having 3 events and knowing you know, if you mess up in one, coming back to the junior world scenario, you've still got another event where you can potentially do something and salvage a weekend.
Yeah. And I was even defend, like, I'm thinking back of my experience, but like, I was an overall skier, but I was way better slalomer than the other 2. But just the fact that I knew I had to focus on 3, put the pressure out of just one. You know, it wasn't necessarily like, oh, if I screw up slalom, I still have tricks and jump. Maybe it wasn't that. It was just like, I got slalom, and then in the afternoon I have tricks, and tomorrow afternoon I have jump. So I didn't have enough mental energy to get nervous about slalom. Yeah. Right.
I think that's where a lot of my stuff transitioned when I stopped tricking and jumping. So in 2003 is basically when I ended the whole overall beyond college stuff.
Right.
Because I still had a couple of years of that, but in that time, I quickly realized if you cut out trick and jump, you got a lot of free time, a lot of available energy. There's only so many times you can slalom. Right. And I remember initially I was like, okay, I'm going to slalom 3 times a day. I just remember like my back being jacked up. Then I'd have to take like weeks off because my back was, you know, all tweaked out.
Yeah, that transition isn't easy.
Yeah, but I think that's when I really got into the gym stuff. You know, doing quite a bit of running, got into the biking. Then, you know, gym 7 days a week, twice a day. That was kind of my program for.
Gym 7 days a week, twice a day?
Yeah.
Well, that explains a few things.
Yeah, so I'd like run or bike to the gym, and then go pretty early. So I'd go in the morning before school. I was in college. And then do my gym thing. So it was like broken up. So I had like a arm day, leg day, all this kind of stuff. I like to hit the speed bag in the
kickboxing room.
Yeah, well, later on they got that, but in the beginning they only had it in the basketball area. So it was like in the back. So you'd have all the guys that were doing their pickup basketball game, and I'll be in the back corner hitting the speed bag.
Yeah, I remember that. They still had it when I went. Yeah.
Yeah. Did they still have the one at the ski lake?
They had one at ski lake when I went.
Yeah, because I bought the one at the ski lake. And put it up
that
there.
comes from you.
Yeah, okay. I bought that one. Yeah, because I liked it. It was like such a good shoulder arm workout. Yeah.
But let's go to the beginning, because you told me that first year at UL wasn't the easiest, actually, right? Like you had a transition to make, even like academic wise.
Yeah, because I mean, kind of like I said earlier, I definitely was not a studious child. Like I didn't really know what it meant to study, or I never figured it out. Like I never figured out how it was to, process the information in class and then try and get it to a test. Yeah. So I had nothing to fall back on when I got to college. I knew the guys, kind of met the guys on the team, but not that much. We're starting to hang out a little bit. But the first test comes around pretty quick. First couple of weeks, you're going to have a test. And I remember I failed every one of my tests. Mm-hmm. I was like, shit, I was kind of down and out. And some of the guys on the team saw that, and they're like, hey, you got to come, we go study here. We study at Bourgeois Hall.
Yep.
Most nights we'll be there. If not there, at the coffee shop or wherever, library. We kind of had these few spots. Like we're not at one, we're at the other. Didn't have cell phones at that point. So I started, studying with Dane and Trent, and a lot of the guys that had been there a couple of years, and kind of learnt from them. And then in the first one, 1.0, you asked me who was like one of my bigger influences when I got to college. I made the turnaround, and right off the first guy that comes to mind was Trent Finlayson. Just because like that guy is wicked smart, but his dedication to the studies was like nothing I'd ever experienced before. Mm-hmm. Like the way he would, write out his notes, study his notes, break them down, make them more understandable. And he, in a way, he kind of took me under his wing and was like, hey, well, this is how I'm doing it. Just kind of do it like this.
Right.
And then
taught you a system.
Yeah, it kind of gifted me a system to make it through college. And, I refined that over time, and I got more efficient at it, and it became something I became really passionate about. I went from being this person that didn't have any confidence in my ability as a student to then suddenly, I'm making good grades, making B's, I'm making A's. I'm top of the class in a lot of them, throughout the whole end of especially throughout the end of the school career. But I think it also came, there's a reason to be at school. Like in college, you got to make a 2.5 at Lafayette. I mean, that's B's and C's. I mean, for somebody that's never got a B or a C in their life, that's quite a big ask.
Right.
I mean, it doesn't seem like it for a lot of people, but for me, it felt like a pretty big challenge. And for me to get that in the beginning, especially, I really had to study. I put everything I had into that studying, and it became my passion in life. Because, it kind of like we've always said, the college skiing isn't just about myself. It's about letting or not letting down more than just myself. There's more people around you that are accountable for you being able to make it to nationals. Yeah. And one of the barriers to nationals is the 2.5, which is awesome. Yeah. I mean, maybe if you didn't have that carrot in front of you to have to get that grade point, I mean, maybe I would have been happy with a, C average 2.0, scrape through, not challenge beyond, not really find out what was possible.
Yeah, and then obviously, like after that didn't become enough, right? Because you didn't end up on a 2.5. You kept getting better grades.
Yeah, I graduated with 3.8. So I really, really turned it around. It really became something that I was very passionate about.
And let me ask you this, because this was certainly the case when I went to UL ski team. Was there a culture of like, hey, as a ski team, we're good at school when you went there? Because there was certainly when I went. And I know for a fact that Ryan Gonzalez now is upholding that to a high standard. Right?
No, it was definitely the case. I mean, yeah, definitely. Because, Trent was a 4.0 student. You had Dane, Amali, and Brad was in architecture school. And, we trained and we studied as a team.
Yeah.
And if someone maybe wasn't getting the grades that was right, then the whole team would almost insulate them and help them bring their grades up, hold them accountable, get them back out, get them into the library. Okay, we're going to be at the library here from here. We want to see you there.
Right.
And, okay, which subject are you struggling with? Because I think I know I failed a math class in the beginning. But then after that, I never failed a math class. Like, after the first one I failed, I got A's in every other one I got.
Right.
And I think it was because, for one, getting to know the team and being comfortable with them and knowing it's okay to reach out and ask for help. That was probably one of the best things that happened to me. I know I was struggling with an English paper, so Dane kind of broke it down for me. He's like, okay, here's how you structure an English paper. If you follow this, pretty much through every English class, you're going to be okay.
Right.
Just little things like that. But yeah, academia was definitely a big focus in Lafayette. It was not an easy degree.
Yeah.
Just because you're on the ski team, that does not make it any easier. If anything, it makes it harder. You've got commitments. I had commitments beyond the ski team. I had British water ski commitments.
Right.
Worlds, Europeans.
Yeah, so it becomes like learning the balancing game, right? Yeah, so you have the collegiate stuff, which obviously is important because I'm assuming you had a scholarship, so
Mm-hmm.
you want to contribute obviously because you're getting school paid, but also you have this other commitment with the British team, and then there's also academics.
Yeah.
And a sprinkle of social life in there, so it becomes I don't want to say overwhelming, but certainly like there's a balancing game going on. But I know you've said that, and I would totally agree. Best 4 years of your life, right?
Yeah. Without it, completely changed my life, for sure. Saved my life. Got friendships that are going to last a lifetime, experiences that will last a lifetime. Mm-hmm. Going into it, I could never have dreamt that it became what it did. Like, I couldn't imagine that I'd never heard of Lafayette, Louisiana.
Me neither. Showed up
from Lincolnshire, England. Like, what the hell is Lafayette, Louisiana?
Exactly.
And of all places, talk about a culture shock. You got the Cajuns there, and they're eating these little crawfish things, and they got their gumbos, and they're doing their Mardi Gras.
They're speaking English, but are they really?
Is that really English?
Yeah, exactly.
Like Sha baby, like like coon-ass stuff.
Right.
But what a place.
What a place. What an experience to be in collegiate skiing, because we talked about it, like at UL, we were taking it a certain way, obviously, like the goal was to win nationals as a team. But the vast majority of collegiate water skiing, it's, you get recruited on campus because you skied on combos when you were 8 or 9 behind grandpa's boat. Mm-hmm. And now there's this thing called collegiate skiing. Come on, get on the team. We'll go to regionals. If we do well, we go to nationals. So actually, our experience is almost like an exception in collegiate water skiing, right? And I can speak for myself, but I'm sure you had a similar experience. I didn't know that. To me, I thought collegiate water skiing was, okay, there are these teams, they're all training, we go to nationals, we try to win. And then you show up and there's, I don't know, Wisconsin-Madison Speedo team at 7 a.m. doing leg dances, There's this also crazy, weird stuff that I'd never seen before.
Yeah, my first nationals, or even just, first college tournament, I assumed that each team was maybe like a different country. As far as, it's got like Italy, France, and
right.
Or England, and we're all going to be at a similar level, and we're all going to take it equally as serious. But that's not the case at all.
Nope.
Some of them are there just they're having a good time. They're in a club, they're able to get to nationals. They're good enough skiers or whatever. But since I was when you're a kid, you get to ski with people at different levels, but you kind of get to a certain point where you don't get that exposure anymore. Everyone's at a similar level, Europeans or worlds, like everyone's quite competitive.
Right.
But I remember the first college tournament I went to, was like, I was on the start dock, and I always liked to go early rotations. So I was always number 1 or number 2 in the rotations. Didn't like to go last. And it was like me, and then the guy before me, it was like his first tournament. And he was going to go out 15 off, 30 miles an hour, and he's just like dancing and partying on the dock, and I'm like next on the dock, and it was
trying to run 39,
Yeah, but it like humbled the whole thing again. It brought a whole different angle on what the sport is, or what it could be, or a whole, a side of the sport that I'd never seen.
Yeah.
Because, you know, I was brought up in an environment that was very tournament based and competition based, and I was always around people training and competing. But then to be around the people that are just there for the fun of it, and you start to realize that, oh, maybe this sport is actually something that you can just have fun with.